What up? I'm Ben Freeman from freeman-pedia.com, and we are down to the final 2 dates. And more importantly, we're getting dangerously close to the exam itself. Hopefully at this point, you're watching the daily Around the AP World in 80 Days videos. You're reviewing through your class notes. You probably feel like you're cheating on your girlfriend with Heimler at this point. Today, we head to the second half of the contemporary period by focusing in on Communist China's Great Leap Forward in the year 1958. Done like 10 dates so far, and none of them are about China. Crazy. Well, one does not simply start talking about China. This calls for some context. Look, I'm not going all the way back to 1200. Let's just say that all that imperialism from Unit 6 was not very kind to China. In fact, in China, they call the 1800s the century of humiliation. You probably remember in class earlier this year looking at cartoons like this one, or 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 this one. Or this one. The industrialized West truly arrived in China in the 1800s and were looking to stay. There were a series of humiliations like the Opium Wars, the Taiping Rebellion, the Sino-Japanese War, the European spheres of influence, the Open Door Policy, and finally the Boxer Rebellion. These were all bad news for the Manchus of the reigning Qing dynasty. Things finally boiled over in 1911 when the people rose up. Think of the 1911 Chinese Revolution as if it were one of those revolutions way back from Unit 5. The 1911 revolution in China was like Jefferson in the United States or Bolivar in Latin America. Under Sun Yat-sen, they were pushing for democracy, land redistribution, and an end to foreign rule from the Manchus, who they saw as foreign invaders. They were able to take down the Qing dynasty and briefly establish a republic. But warlords and infighting led to a decade-long civil war. And after World War II, the nationalists were defeated by the communists to establish communist rule in the largest country on the planet. As soon as the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, took power in 1949, they began making massive changes to one of Earth's largest and most enduring cultures. Okay, so after millennia of dynastic rule in China, the communists are now in charge, and they're going to be making a few changes around here. But why does 1958 matter? 1958 was the culmination of the Chinese Communist Party's attempt to completely shift the direction of China. And shifting the direction of China is like turning a massive container ship. You can't just turn on a dime and pivot to a new course for the largest empire on the planet. So between 1949 and 1958, the CCP gradually instituted collectivization and worked to rid the People's Republic of China from all private property. In their first decade in power, they began banishing all religious ceremonies. They banned foot binding, child marriage, and opium. So in 1958, the founder of the Chinese Communist Party and the leader of the People's Republic of China, a guy named Mao Zedong, implemented what came to be known as the Great Leap Forward. You gotta remember, this is a communist state based on the Soviet Union. So why 1958? Well, it was literally the beginning of the second 5-year plan in China. Communists have a planned economy, and those plans ran on 5-year increments. The government sets criteria and quotas to be met within this time period, and 1958 was the first year of China's second 5-year plan. The idea behind the Great Leap Forward was pretty simple. Over the past 10 years, the CCP has been collectivizing agriculture in China. Now, in 1958, all private land was banned. Mao's government established impossibly high quotas in agriculture and industry. Mao forecasted that in 15 years, China would surpass the United Kingdom in industrial output and eventually surpass the United States in 50 years. This led to their motto, exceeding the UK, catching the USA. Now, this owes nothing to the disaster that was the Great Leap Forward, but due to reforms and liberalization after Mao died, China did surpass the UK in steel production in the 1970s and the United States in 1993. But Western economies were transitioning out of steel production as a measurement of economic capability by that point, so So to make this happen, the Great Leap Forward was instituted to massively increase grain and steel production across China. All right, so you know China is under communist leadership and making massive changes in the culture, economy, and society of China. But what actually happened in 1958? Just prior to this year, in November of 1957, Mao went to Moscow as the Chinese representative at the International Meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties. 64 different political parties were represented at this meeting. Remember, a big role of Units 7, 8, and 9 is how these communist governments were expanding globally and the role that played in the contemporary period, 1900 to present. If you're an American, this was like the Court of Owls or the Sinister Six or the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. All of America's enemies were here. Khrushchev from the Soviet Union, Kim Il-sung from North Korea, Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam, the Mongols. Well, the Mongol Communist Party was there. They were all here. And of course, that meant Mao, as the leader of the CCP, which was the largest communist nation on earth, was front row center. Mao then returned to China rejuvenated and set to work on implementing his Great Leap Forward. Side note, this was the beginning of the end of the unity of global communism as a solid thing. After this, Mao will split with Khrushchev on multiple issues shortly after this meeting. But on May 23, 1958, the Great Leap Forward began. And by August, Mao divided China into 75,000 communes. Think of it as the banners of the Manchus, but for communists. Each commune was responsible for government, political functions, and economic functions during the Great Leap Forward. By September, Mao was installing small backyard furnaces like this one. They don't produce steel, they only produce pig iron, which is brittle and most notably not steel, but Mao didn't trust intellectuals and felt that these backyard furnaces encouraged enthusiasm amongst the workers because they're making their own steel locally, even though, again, they weren't making steel at all. So the industrial side was failing. How was the agricultural side doing? Terrible. Okay, so this is kind of minutia, but it tells you everything you need to know about communism and dictatorships in general and how they're just a disaster. Mao based the projected crop surpluses on a now discredited Soviet agronomist, Trofim Lysenko. Also, maybe the best title in world history, Discredited Soviet Agronomist. I'll put that on my Twitter bio. Anyways, this guy had some insane ideas, like he was a legitimate mad scientist, but he was a mad agronomist? That's actually better. Mad agronomist. Since Lysenko was the head of the Academy of Sciences, if you went against his theories, he killed you. Literally. Let's do this. Close your eyes. I want you to imagine the world's most evil botanist. Like, picture an agronomist that killed roughly as many people as World War II. Okay, got it? Open your eyes. Look at this guy, right? He has big mad agronomist energy. So Mao looked at this guy and was like, yes, we will do what he says. Here's some of Lysenko's theories. Close cropping. You know how you have to separate seeds so that they don't steal resources from one another? Nope. According to Lysenko, seeds of the same class won't compete with each other. It's like communism for seeds. But if you pointed out that this was false and easily proven false by centuries of research and practice, you got a free trip to the gulag. Deep plowing. You know why crops only grow so deep in the soil? Because you haven't plowed deep enough. So Mao had his fields plowed 2 meters deep. This way plants could grow better, deeper roots. But if you pointed out that this was false and easily proven false by centuries of research and practice, you got a free trip to the gulag. And Western scientists constantly pointed out how these policies were completely ignorant of the elementary principles of genetics and plant physiology. Of course, mad agronomist Lysenko brushed that off as bourgeois science and literally called them the Russian word for haters. So you often hear of Stalin and Mao being the largest killers of all time, but it was really discredited Soviet mad agronomist Trofim Lysenko who led to the famines in the Soviet Union and China. All right, so they weren't able to meet Mao's lofty goals of the Great Leap Forward. What were the real outcomes? I don't want to give too much away here, but the Great Leap Forward was the largest disaster in the history of the planet. Up to 50 million people died. Think about that. 50 million. That's roughly the same as the Mongol conquests. That's more than double World War I. That's like 15 Vietnam Wars. That's like 50 American Civil Wars. Despite great weather in 1958, there weren't enough people to collect all of the harvest. Why? Too many people were moved into the industrial sector. You gotta love that planned economy. So huge amounts of crops just rotted. Plus, a massive locust swarm ate a huge percentage of the crops. Why? Mao had tried to get rid of the 4 pests: mosquitoes, rats, flies, and sparrows. The first 3 make sense, but the 4th one, sparrows do eat crops, but they also eat locusts. No sparrows, locusts run wild in China. It gets so bad that the Chinese actually have to import 250,000 sparrows from the Soviet Union. It's just one bad thing after another. Oh, that great weather in 1958 did not return in 1959, and there were widespread droughts and flooding of the Yellow River. I'm not sure how many horsemen of the apocalypse we've checked off here, but it's a majority. Back to Mao. He couldn't let the world see China as failing, so he maintained the exports of crops from China, which left the Chinese farmers and workers without food, which means even more famine. Other nations reached out, tried to help, including Japan and, of course, the United States, but China refused. The Chinese population decreased in both 1960 and 1961. That's only the 3rd time that's happened since the Mongol invasion 600 years before this. So that's the Great Leap Forward back in 1958. Ooh, only one date left. I'm tired of all these commies with their failed economic policies and discredited mad agronomists. They can't keep getting away with it. It all has to come crashing down at some point. But you'll have to wait another 31 years, all the way to the year 1989. it.